No matter who you are or where you go, heading outside even for a few minutes is always worth it. I'm your host, Amy Bouchatz, and here at Humans Outside, we're using the Humans Outside 365 Challenge to build a life around spending time in nature while hearing from fascinating outdoor-minded guests. As a journalist for 19 years, I've let curiosity be my guide. After my husband's injuries from military service, we started looking for a better way to live. That's why we moved sight unseen to Alaska to see if an outdoor-focused life was the answer. Since September 2017, I've personally spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter what, to explore how nature can change my life. Ready to hear from experts and outdoor lovers who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same? Let's go! One of the things I hear over and over again from listeners who have started their own outdoor habits is the surprising power they've found in simply going on a regular walk. Most of these people aren't walking daily, but they are integrating walks into their outdoor habits. And through doing so, they are finding all sorts of benefits. And that's exactly what author Annabel Streets talks about in this Humans Outside Best of episode. She even lays out a new way to tackle walking every week. Enjoy. When I first started my daily outdoor habit, I knew that there was one type of outdoor activity I could always count on: going for a walk. At bare minimum, I thought I could put on whatever clothing the weather demanded, shorts, bundled up, rain gear, whatever, and either walk down the street or go for a walk on some trails behind our house that are owned by a nearby high school. If anything, I hesitated to rely on walking for my outdoor time because I thought it would be too much of the same day over day and limit me from seeing all the different ways heading outside could change my life, which of course was the point of the whole original experiment. One of the things I realized pretty quickly was that each walking experiment wasn't quite the same as the last one in the way I expected it would be. Taking a walk, as it turned out, was an adventure every time I did it in its own special way, whether I was expecting it to be or not. Today's guest, Annabel Streets, found walking to be so beneficial and varied that she wrote a book about it, giving readers 52 different ways to go for a walk and a detailed and compelling rundown of the benefits of each one. Her book, 52 Ways to Walk, is almost like a weekly devotional meets challenge for those who want to go outside for a stroll, and I have truly enjoyed reading it. Annabel is not just a walker, she's also the author of award-winning fiction and then other practical nonfiction titles, including the Age Well Project. Today, Annabel is going to, walk us through walking. Annabel, welcome to Humans Outside.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Amy. This is wonderful.
So we like to imagine ourselves talking to our guests in their favorite outdoor space, like we're hanging out somewhere that you love. Maybe in this instance, we're going for a walk. Just an idea. But where are we talking with you today?
Well, I think today we are talking as we walk beside the River Thames. The River Thames, as you probably know, runs through London, but it's also very close to my house. And I've been going there for 20 years. And I love walking beside water, rivers or canals, lakes, the sea. But the River Thames is quite special to me. So that's where we are, Amy.
Awesome. I love it. I've never been here before, so I'm happy to join you here in this space for our walk and chat. So tell us, just as a very basic, how did you become someone who likes to go outside?
Well, I grew up carless, so I have a bit of a head start because, possibly a head start, possibly I should have been bored of walking by now. But my parents didn't drive, and we lived in a little tiny village, somewhere very remote, probably, if you imagine a little village in Alaska, I was in that sort of place, but not so cold. And a lot of rain in Wales, so it was always raining. But because we didn't have a car, my parents couldn't drive, and there were no taxis or buses or anything, we had to walk if we wanted to go visit a friend, go to a birthday party, go to school, go to the shop, anything we wanted to do, we had to walk there. So I guess that's what started it, really. So it's never felt intimidating to me. It's always felt very comfortable. Having said that, when I got my first car, that was so incredibly exciting because I'd never been in a car. I just drove everywhere. I could not get out of my car. I loved it. But then after a few years in my car, I got terrible backache, from sitting in a desk job and then sitting in my car and then sitting on my sofa all evening. And I thought, this is really not good for me. So then I started walking again. And then I took it very seriously. And then I just sort of fell in love with it, really.
So if you grew up walking in the rain, then that's one of those things, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but it's really intimidating to people is going outside and walking in not so ideal conditions. Like, oh, why would I do that? That sounds bad. It sounds uncomfortable. But it sounds like that's something that you were accustomed to right off the bat. There's no intimidation factor. It's just how you grew up.
Yes, so that's right, Amy. It didn't intimidate me, but what I found later on was that none of my children and many of my friends and my husband, they would never come out with me if the conditions weren't absolutely perfect. So they were what I call fair weather walkers, which I think most people are. They might go out for a stroll on a Sunday afternoon if the sun is shining and it's all perfect. So for me in the UK here, we don't have those conditions very often. And I had this dog who needed a lot of exercise. And, day after day, I would say to family and friends, let's go for a walk. I need to walk the dog. And they would say, oh, it's too cold, or it's too wet, or it's too foggy, or it's too windy, or it's too dark, or I've just eaten. There were so many excuses. And one day I just thought, well, you know what? What if I could find a response to each one of these excuses? And what if every excuse they gave me was, in fact, a reason to walk rather than to sit on the sofa? So I just started sort of digging around in the research. And I'd already written a book about women doing long distance hikes, and that had a little bit of science in. So I was already quite interested in all of these studies that are being done in universities and medical schools and laboratories all over the world. And these studies often don't get much airtime because I think a lot of people think, oh, walking, yeah, that's boring. We know how to do that. And in fact, what I discovered was that we don't really know how to walk in the way that our ancestors did because we're spending so much time sitting in front of a laptop or a TV screen. And when we get up, our body, we're all out of alignment. We're not moving properly. Our hips are spreading because we're sitting on our butts all day. So I worked with some walking coaches, and the two of them separately sort of realigned me and really taught me to sort of walk properly so that I could stride more efficiently and so that walking was actually more pleasurable. And from that point on, then I started looking at the footwear. How is that affecting how I walk? And that's not something I never did before. I just put my trainers on and off I went. So I looked at things like footwear. I looked at things like the way I was carrying a bag and how that was all pulling me down to one side. The satchels and laptop bags, so you're sort of walking along, sort of tipped over half the time. And then I sort of looked at all these excuses about the weather. And then from there, I just sort of went and I ended up with sort of 52 things, which very conveniently fitted in for a year of different walking styles. So that's a very long explanation, really.
No, I was kind of wondering if you had to scratch around for 52 to meet that, but it sounds like you came up with 52 and then it was more like, oh, check it out, that's a year. So
yeah, and in fact, since then I found more because reports are still dropping into my inbox sort of every few weeks about something else about walking. So in fact, now I think I'm probably up to about 60, but there's 52. There are 52 in the book.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me how you really flipped on its head this excuses into reasons. And you can take that and really apply that to so many things in life that are maybe a little uncomfortable on the outset, but once you start doing it, the discomfort almost becomes a reason to do it.
Yeah, no, it's funny, isn't it? You're absolutely right. But some of the reasons that we give ourselves are that they're just because our brain is lazy or our body feels a bit tired. But actually, we now know from all of these studies that what our brain wants is it really wants to be worked a bit. And what our body wants is that wants to be worked a bit. So the sofa, at the end of the day, the sofa looks very tempting. But actually, if we've been sitting down all day, our body doesn't really want to lie on the sofa. Our body really wants to go for a walk. So in fact, night walking was one of my big revelations because before I would never have gone out after dark. When it got dark, that was time to be indoors. And I discovered an amazing woman actually who leads these hikes, right through the night in really wild locations, which I would never have done that on my own. I'd have been far too scared. But she takes small groups and she walks in very remote places. There's absolutely no light at all. We're not allowed to have any torches or iPhones or anything, and we're not allowed to talk. So we walk for miles in silence with the sea pounding on one side and the wind on the other side. And it's a very wild and elemental experience that's completely changed my view about what I want to do in the evening. My favorite evening occupation now is not to sit on the sofa and watch a box set. It's actually to get my boots on and go out walking. So that's one of the many revelations I found while researching my book.
Yeah, I'm so glad you bring that up because I have this year really discovered nighttime as well. I am with you. Daytime is for being outside and doing things in the daylight, and nighttime is for sleeping. The end. Period. End of story. Why would I go outside at night? It's dark. But if you don't go outside at night, you never see the stars. And you never have these sensory experiences, which is what you just described, being able to hear the waves crash and experience the space in a way that you never would notice because you're distracted by what you can experience in the daylight.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think we forget, don't we, just how we're really dominated by our eyes. So when you walk at night, suddenly the vision is gone and you can't see. So what happens is your underused ears and your underused nose just flip straight into action. I think it's almost it's a biological thing, isn't it? The body's like, hey, I can't see. Quick, smell, listen. There's danger around. And there may be danger in Alaska, but here, certainly in Europe, there's really no danger at all. We don't have bears or wolves. So the only danger, of course, is that you might fall over or you might trip. But what I found extraordinary was, I said, one of the first things this walking woman coach said, she said, was just have faith in your feet. And I thought, what? No, she said, you've just got to trust your feet, trust them, which I thought was a bit, woo-woo. What does she mean? I'm sure I'm going to fall over and twist my ankle. But, she was absolutely right, because when it's dark, if you concentrate on your feet and you sort of let your brain go into your feet, it's extraordinary. You don't trip, you don't fall. Even in pitch black, your feet sort of learn to navigate the landscape in a way that never happens in the light. So that was another extraordinary thing that I discovered.
Yeah, so I, for the first time literally ever, stayed up all night this past summer. I attempted to do a 100-mile run over a mountain pass here in Alaska. So listeners and you may have heard that the sun doesn't set in Alaska in the summertime, which is not entirely true in the entire state. There are definitely parts where that's true. Where I am, it does set, but it doesn't ever get completely dark for a period of the year. And then for the rest of the summer, it is dark for just a few hours. So at this particular time, the sun set around, it got dark around 11:30, and then it came back up around 5. So that period of time between those two hours, I was running with my friend, and I had a headlamp torch on, strapped to my forehead so that I could see routes and whatnot and not trip, and just to give us some visibility with people who were coming the other way. But like I said, I literally had never stayed up all night before, ever in my whole life. So there's no chance in the world that I would have been anywhere at that hour. Forget in the middle of nowhere in this just jaw-dropping mountain pass. Because I was there and because I was doing this at night, I saw the sunset, I saw the sunrise, I saw this space in the darkness, and then when I came, it was out and back, so on my way back in, it was starting to get light, or it was light in some of the spots I was in, so I got to then compare that to the light. It was the most extraordinary part of that experience, was being out there overnight and seeing that space and experiencing that space in those various times of darkness. And there are a lot of things about that race. Running 100 miles is no small thing. Attempting to run 100 miles, also no small thing. It was very hard, but that, I think, was my favorite part. Being able to just be immersed in that, in the darkness. And I never would have, I thought that was going to be the worst part. Full stop. Was like, I'm never going to do this again because I don't want to stay up overnight again. That was my prediction. So it was amazing.
That sounds absolutely amazing. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed by that. Gosh, wow. Because
Well,
running is taking it to another level, because you really have to trust in your feet then, don't you?
yeah. And also, please don't think that I was running quickly. So there was a lot of walking in the middle of there, and it was a very slow run at the best of times. So that's how you run 100 miles if you're not an extraordinary runner, slowly. So neither here nor there.
Well, congratulations. Well done. I take my hat off to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hey humans! Did you know you can officially join the Humans Outside 365 Challenge and score some really cool and exclusive challenge swag, including a finisher medal and a decal on humansoutside.com/challenge? You'll also get an outdoor challenge guide written by me for you, an exclusive challenge tracker, and insider info all year long. You don't want to be left out of this. There is never a wrong time to join the Humans Outside 365 Challenge. So get going. Join it today. Go to humansoutside.com/challenge to learn more now. Now, back to the show. So we've talked about how you got to this point. We talked about some of the reasons we've gotten away from walking, both as a regular part of our day. You mentioned just the sitting at the desk. I'm sitting here making a podcast with you, acutely aware of the fact that I'm doing it since we're talking about walking. We sit in front of our TV. We sit in our car and our transportation. Not all the places we live are walkable. So do you think that those of us who are trying to spend more time outside skip over this like walkability or walking as a way to spend time outside? Do you think we skip over it too quickly, sort of just dismiss it as too easy or too obvious?
Yeah, I do. I also think quite a lot of people think that walking is boring. In the way that they might not think running or cycling. So running or cycling, a lot of people think they might not do it, but they don't think it's boring. It has a little bit of sort of fitness glamour, doesn't it? And there's something quite parochial about walking. It's almost as though because we all learned to do it when we were 2, we've been doing it for ages, and we don't have to train. Therefore, it's dull. And certainly that's what I found with my children. Walking, that's really boring. It hasn't got the excitement of speed. And there's something sort of trudgy about tramping along. So I think we need to overcome that. I think the pandemic has been fantastic in that respect, because a lot of people then had to walk if they wanted exercise or just to get out of their house. So a lot of people who didn't walk 2 years ago have discovered it and are now quite committed walkers. So that's one of the upsides of the last 2 years. But I felt even then, the other reason I wrote my book was I thought, what if they start all getting bored because they're just doing, the same walk at the same time with the same person in the same place, and they've been doing it for 2 years through the pandemic, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll go back to the gym now. And I guess I just wanted everyone to start thinking, oh, maybe I could walk in a different place, or I could walk without following my Google Maps, or I could walk with different people, or I could walk at a different time of day, for example, or I could walk backwards, or I could walk barefoot or in minimal footwear. So just to get people thinking about, just keeping some novelty in their walking practice, if you like.
You mentioned that you really like walking at night now. What is another favorite way to walk that you have? And I would love to know your least favorite way to walk, because there are 52 of them. They can't all be your favorite. So what's your least favorite way to walk?
My least favorite, gosh, that's a really hard question, because I sort of like them all. I suppose backwards walking is not something that I would do all the time. I do a little bit of it every now and then because I think it's very good for the brain, and it's also good for certain muscles that we don't use going forward. But I have to be honest, I don't go out and walk backwards for an hour every day. I would probably fall in the River Thames or I might get run over.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's not my least favorite, but it is probably the least practical.
Yeah. This imagined conversation has taken a sharp right turn to a rescue operation as we fish Annabelle out of the river because she decided that we are now walking backwards.
It's time to go backwards. That's right, Amy. Come on, backwards.
Other than nighttime walking, what's another favorite that you've developed?
Walking beside water, which I suppose is obvious given I have the Thames here. But what I didn't realise was all of the science that goes into walking beside water. I just thought it was a nice, a nice river there, and one of the most memorable walks of my entire life, I think, is when I walked alone for 10 days and I followed a river through the south of France. And in fact, it was a river with a canal beside it. So quite often I was walking in the middle on this track with a huge river on one side, a canal on the other side. And I was on my own with a backpack, and I couldn't understand why I felt so happy all the time, because I was getting little messages from my family, are you missing us? And messages from my friends,
No.
you must be lonely. And I thought, why am I really loving this? That's not quite normal. Besides, I went home and I started looking. In fact, I have read lots of books about water and what happens to our body and brain when we're near water. And, it's all explained scientifically in some ways. So one of the things that happens with light is that it falls on our skin and it then creates a hormone called serotonin, which, is the happy hormone. But when we're walking beside water, and particularly lots of water, so I had it on both sides of me, you've got all the light reflecting. So you've got double the amount of light. So you can think of that very crassly as double the amount of happiness. I just felt so very happy. And I think part of that was just the abundance of light. And then there's also this theory, which I discovered from evolutionary biologists who believe that as soon as we're in the presence of water, for our ancestors, that meant food and it meant drink. It meant we were safe. So if we're near water, we're safe, really. We're not going to starve or dehydrate to death. So there's something in our brain that relaxes when we're near water, particularly running water, like a river where you can drink from it, you can wash in it, you've got fish. Not that I was eating the fish or even drinking the water, but clearly my brain just felt deeply relaxed. So I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I think about walking along a beach and all of the sensory things that are going on there. Often you're barefoot, so you've got that feeling of your feet grounded in the sand and the sand on your toes. Often you're warm. When we think about walking on a beach, we might think about a tropical location. So now the sun is making you happy. Although if you live in UK, you know that not all beaches are warm. Let's start there. And I am from the coast of California, but Northern California, and I can attest not all beaches are warm. So also in Alaska, not all beaches are warm. So let's dismiss that. But it's still a wonderful feeling. Even walking around an icy beach is something that I love to do because you have the sound of the waves and it's just, and the smell and it's like a package deal. And it's interesting because I never thought about that package as being specific to just being beside water. I thought about it as being, like I just said, the sand and the sun and the waves and like just this whole kit and caboodle. But I, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess walking along a river does make me feel that way as well.
I think that's a really good point that you raised about the sound. And again, we take it for granted, don't we? The sound of water, moving water. So the canal didn't make much moving water in the sense that waves would, but the river, there was constant water as it sort of went rushing along. And so when I was researching later, what are the sounds? And loads of scientists have done all these amazing laboratory tests. Which sounds make us relax most deeply and thoroughly? And it is the sound of water, more so than music, more so than the voices of our loved ones. Water is when we really deeply relax. So you've got the sound. And of course, you've got an abundance of wildlife when you're by water. You've got your water birds and your seabirds and you've got plant life. So there's also lots to keep our brain interested and engaged. I think it's sort of almost perfect, really.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you just sort of came up naturally by happenstance with 52 ways. So obviously it wasn't difficult to come up with 52 ways and that you have extras. I'm wondering, what are some secret additional ways to walk that aren't in your book? We did not talk about this in advance, so if you don't know off the top of your head, forgive me for asking.
Oh, well, I'm just trying to think this. I've got some studies that I've just been looking at that have just come through in the last few days, and they are about how wind blows away. There was one that looked at COVID germs, and it was that you're just far less likely to catch any sort of germ if you're out on a windy day. So I just remember telling someone who was very worried, oh, I'm just not ready to go out. And I said, well, look, let's go out on a really windy day because there will be no germs. And she was thrilled because she didn't know that. She was feeling that she could never go out. So I think and again, that's something that scientists had sat and they'd sort of watched germs moving and looked at the speed of the wind. And the greater the speed, the more quickly all the germs just dissipated. So you've got wonderfully clean air. And the same goes for pollution. So if you're in a polluted area, which obviously you're not in Alaska, but in London it's very polluted, if you're worried about pollution, which we should all be really, you really want to go for a walk when it's either very windy or when it's been pouring with rain, because both of those two things, which a lot of people don't like walking in big gales and they don't like walking in pouring rain, but that is when the air is really clean. Yeah. So for urban walking, that's the way to go.
Yeah, we get big wind here. We are the first day that I ever set foot in this place that I live was a windy day in June, and I, with fear and trepidation in my heart because I was not a fan of wind, went into the visitor center and asked the little person behind, there's like a little high school kid behind the counter, oh, it's windy outside. Does that happen often here? And he just sort of chirped back at me, oh, that's Palmer, which is our town. That's Palmer. The wind comes off the glacier. Like that was a encouraging statement. Oh, good. The wind comes off the glacier. Awesome. Sounds cold to me. But that means that it is often windy here, and that's just a fact of life. However, even though we don't have air pollution from vehicles and that kind of thing, when a lot of people are heating their home by wood stoves, that smoke just sort of settles in the winter. And then, of course, like anywhere else in the world right now, we do have a lot of wildfires. And even though they won't necessarily be near where I am, again, that smoke settles here in this valley. And so those windy days do clear that out. And I give all of those as an example to say no matter where you are, wind is pushing something out of there. So we should be grateful for it. Yeah.
Well, it's so true. And, if we didn't have wind, we would all die. So wind is really essential. But the woman who really changed my mind about wind, actually, right at the beginning, even before I got to the science, was Georgia O'Keeffe, the artist, because she absolutely loved windy walks. And I just read her accounts, and she would just write great long letters about, I love the wind, so wonderful. And I thought, I'm missing something. Why am I not loving the wind? And just knowing that she had loved it, and she walked like you in very windy places in Texas, got huge hot dry winds. And I so went out one day and I just thought, I'm going to imagine I'm Georgia O'Keeffe and see how this wind feels. And I started to think, actually, this wind's quite nice.
It's so funny you say it, because when I go out in the rain or wind, and I spend time outside every single day, so these things will happen, I feel like a Jane Austen character, just sort of meandering in the wilds, in the wind and the rain, catching her death of cold. No. No one dies from a trifling cold. These are the things you think about when you read way too much, way too many Jane Austen novels. But it's a little bit comforting though in a way, because in those stories that's presented as being a taste of freedom. Yes. And when I think about being out there and walking, I want to think about it in the context of this is a form of freedom for me, that I can and I have the ability to open my door and step outside, even for just 20 minutes, and go for a walk, no matter the weather.
It's the ultimate in freedom, really, isn't it? I don't think you ever feel, I never feel freer than when I'm just outside walking. And in fact, the wilder the weather, the freer I feel, really, oddly.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. But what's so funny about some of the things that you've been pointing out is they seem to me like things we intuitively know. You were happier walking in those water spaces because you intuitively knew that this was a good place to be. And then there's science to back that up. We are happier when we hear the sound of waves, and we feel better when that's happening because we intuitively know something, and then there's science to back that up. When you are feeling wild and free out taking a walk, your body is telling you something, your brain is telling you something, and then your book presents the science to back that up. And I just love a book full of reasons why I should keep doing something that I already like. So
You're absolutely right, Amy. And when I was looking at the history of walking, and I found that, Coleridge, for example, the poet, he would walk from waterfall to waterfall. He called himself a waterfall chaser. And after he did these waterfall hikes, he often suffered depression, but he would always come back from his waterfall hike and his depression had gone. So he just knew that instinctively. But now we have science. We have science saying, that's because of the negative air ions. So I love the fact that our body actually knows it. We don't really need the data. Our bodies know it, but our brain needs the data, doesn't it, to convince us to get off the sofa and go out.
That's so true. Okay, can you give listeners 3 or 4 ways to get started with a walking habit?
Oh, you mean for someone who just doesn't walk?
Yeah,
and
somebody
maybe
who doesn't walk or doesn't
want to walk.
Yeah, doesn't want to walk or doesn't, or thinks that we're crazy because we are spending all of this time going on and on about how much we like going for a walk backwards.
I suppose the first place to start, I think, is to start small. Don't go off and decide you're going to do a great long pilgrimage, 35 kilometers a day up and down mountains. Start small. Start with a 10-minute walk. Start with getting up and making it part of your routine. So in the way that it's part of your routine now, Amy, and my routine, we just couldn't imagine not going outside, could we, and moving around a bit. So start small. Start with 10 minutes or 12 minutes. I think there's a chapter in the book called Take a 12-minute walk, because scientists have discovered that a 12-minute walk is all it takes to change over 500 metabolites, little compounds in your body. So within 12 minutes, your body is saying, yay, I love this, I need this. So it doesn't have to be a long walk. It can be short. And also choose a route that suits you. So if you're not a sort of a hardened walker, find a route that's perhaps got a coffee shop on it so that you can grab a coffee or grab some water. Find a route that's perhaps got a bench on it so that there's somewhere to sit down if you're going to be a bit tired after 10 minutes or 5 minutes. And also find a route that you like. There's nothing worse than walking along a highway. So find some nature, and whether that's urban nature, a park or a cemetery. I love cemeteries. Just do that and find a walk that you can do from your door. I know that's sometimes easier said than done, but to be able to walk out of your door is much more compelling than thinking, I've got to go, I've got to get in the car, I've got no petrol, I've got to go to the garage first, and then I've got to find somewhere to park. That's very easy. That's a very easy stage at which to fall, isn't it? Think, I'll just stay inside. So find a short route from your door that includes something you like, whether that's a favourite little shop or a bench or a tree or a view, and factor that into your morning, and then try and do it every morning, and then just see where that takes you.
Yeah. So you and I were talking before we started recording, but inspired by reading your book and getting ready to talk to you today, I thought, you know what? I am not going to take a walk in the woods, which is what I usually do, because in my brain, I think, oh gosh, like if I'm going to go, I should go into the trees. Like that's going for a walk. And instead, I'm going to take a walk down my nasty ice cover street, see what's going on. So the example would be, one would be undoubtedly pleasant. One would be questionable. And what I found on my walk down just covered in ice and slop, and cars are going around me, and I'm having to navigate these humongous ice berms. It's just disaster from a ground perspective. What I found was a really beautiful sunset reflecting in the puddles on the street that I 100% would not have seen was I in the woods. And my neighbor drove by, we chatted for a second. He wouldn't have driven by me in the bushes in the woods. Wasn't going to happen, right? So there are 2 things right there that I saw and experienced because I chose to just literally open my door and head down my street instead of finding a destination to experience going for a walk, which is exactly what you're saying. Find an accessible area, but then also be open to experiencing that in a way that may not have been what you were expecting.
You're so right also about the importance of, having those relationships, whether that's with your neighbors or, you know, with the people that are also walking. And if you drive somewhere, it's a lonely experience really being in a car. We forget how lonely it is. You're not really making contact with anyone. But when you step out of your door, most of us will pass someone, even if we're just waving to someone through a window. There is a little bit of human interaction. So you're spot on with that. And that's, of
Yeah.
course, how we build our communities, isn't it? By walking and
Yeah.
noticing that someone's left their door open, or waving to someone, or,
Right.
collecting a stray cat, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Annabelle, before we let you go today, can you tell us maybe one of your most favorite or most essential pieces of gear, something that you use or love or own for your walking experience that just really makes it the most pleasant it can be?
Well, everyone will have their own climate that they have to contend with, and I have to contend with a lot of rain here. So for me, it is waterproof trousers, really, because
Mm.
most we all have a coat, don't we? That's a bit
Mm-hmm.
waterproof, but generally, people set off and they might have an anorak, and I used to do this, but then they've still got their jeans on, and then you're wearing your jeans and they get drenched, and it's a really horrible experience. But if you have waterproof trousers in your backpack or in your pocket, you can just put them on, and
Yeah.
also you can sit down in your waterproof trousers. You can sit on the edge of the riverbank, or you can sit on a wet bench, or you can sit on a cold sandy beach, and you still
Yeah.
stay warm and dry inside.
Yeah, I have to say, for those US listeners, you'll Google or search for quote unquote rain pants, is what they're called here. And although waterproof trousers sounds much more official. And I have to say, it is one of the best things I own. Like, they don't get used, I don't use them every single day. It doesn't rain that much here, but man, am I glad when I have them. They weren't very expensive, and they're going to last me the rest of my natural life. So. Just the one pair, and I'm really glad I own those. So thank you for bringing those up. Okay, final thing. If we were to, since we've been imagining ourselves hanging out with you, having a walk, if we were going to imagine ourselves with you in a outdoor time that you love, something that you just like to think back to, where are you and what are you doing? Would you mind describing that for us?
Oh, I think I will be up in the mountains in the north of Greece. Am I allowed to be in
Mm.
Greece?
You are allowed to be in Greece. We like
It's
Greece. Let's go there.
it's up by it's a very remote area, and I walked there last year, and it is on the border with Albania, so it's right up in that northern corner.
Mm.
No one really goes there, and we had been walking for days, and there were no roads, completely uh, all off sort of off piste really, and lots and lots of golden eagles, amazing wildlife. And then we got to the top of this mountain, and lo and behold, there was a cafe there, and they were serving hot food, which they got all the food, and they sort of carted it up hundreds of mountains on the backs of donkeys. We just wow, we can have spaghetti bolognese at the top of this mountain, which is like 300 miles from anywhere.
What a treat. And one thing about walking a lot is you get hungry and you're very into spaghetti at the end. I can testify that that's the
You need
case.
spaghetti at the end, indeed.
So, friends, I hope that you take a look at Annabelle's book, 52 Ways to Walk, for some ways to walk. Maybe next time it will be walk and eat spaghetti. We'll get added to it. And Annabelle, thank you so much for giving us your time and your expertise today to share about walking. We appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Amy. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Humans Outside. Help me out by leaving a 5-star rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help other listeners find the podcast too. Now, go get outside. Until next time, we'll see you out there.